Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'll try to be brief, giving the time consideration. Sitting down and listening to all the deliberations and watching what has happened through the period before we had a case and after we've had a case, one word comes to my mind is that the executive, I would say, has trumped on us. And this word is inspired by Donald Trump and his slow and erratic response to the fight against COVID-19. That's exactly what the executive have done in this case. They trumped. They slowly and erratically responded to the fight against COVID-19, and that is the truth. We could have avoided this. I remember when we were here the last time, I posed the question directly to the Honorable Minister of Health and asked him, as the leader of the health sector, what would you advise in regards to the closure of our borders? Because I remember that morning, both I and the Honorable Member of Banjul South ran to the Speaker's office literally and asked him, please ask her, we want to bring a motion to pass a resolution. The minister, in my understanding, belittled the threat of the coronavirus, and that is why we are facing this. I totally agree with the Honorable Member. If this government acted fastly and closed our borders, we wouldn't have had a case, because all these cases were imported. And I will give you the timeline. Senegal recorded their first case around the 2nd of March. And we had an imported case directly from Senegal with the Bangladesh national. From the 2nd of March, we had time, 2 weeks, to have closed the borders so that that man wouldn't have come into the country. And this is the action we failed to do as a nation. And now we are facing the consequences. United Kingdom registered their first case 28th of February. This was before our first case came into the country. If we took action and closed our borders, we wouldn't be here now. So I think the government has the responsibility. They have trumped on us, and now we are here, and they are still trumping on us. This is what is happening in this situation. Because the regulations, and I would first start to answer the questions why we decided as a committee to give them 45 days. Because we have realized no matter what has happened, what is happening or what is going to happen, it is important as a country for us to have social distancing in order to curb this. So whether they have done what they are supposed to do, it is our responsibility as members to protect the people of this country. And we need social distancing. So there must be some restriction to restrict people in their homes to curb the spreading of this virus. So that is why we said 45 days. But after listening to everything here, I am proposing that even though if we are agreeing to give them 45 days, let us give them a condition on that. Now we will give them 45 days on the condition that within 2 weeks of this 45 days, you are going to give us a plan. And I will tell you why. If you look at all these countries that are declaring a lockdown or state of emergency, I'll use America as an example. While this lockdown is going on, their parliaments were preparing for what will happen, what packages their people will happen. And just America, they have passed 3 bills since this lockdown started. They first passed the Coronavirus Preparedness and Response Supplementary Appropriation Act 2020. This was 8.3 billion to prepare for medical supplies. Now this is something I was expecting from the Ministry of Finance to come to us. When I heard Barrow said 500 million for COVID-19, the first thing I wondered is where this was coming from. That message wasn't clear. They just said he is allocating 500 million. Until yesterday, I didn't know this was coming from our budget, and the minister explained that it was going to be reallocation environment. And I'm a little bit uncomfortable with this. I know environment is allowed within budget lines and within ministries, but if you look at the Constitution, and I've always had this problem, the Constitution will tell you under Section 153 that when subject to 150, if in respect of any financial year it is found that the amount appropriate under the Appropriation Act is insufficient, or that there is a need has arisen for a purpose for which no amount has been, I emphasize, no amount has been appropriated by that act, a supplementary estimate showing the sums required shall be laid before the National Assembly before the expenditure has been incurred. So if we are to vie for something that we did not plan for, is this possible? I really want the minister to come and explain this, whether the powers give him to vie for something, because this COVID-19 is not planned. These funds, we have never planned it in the budget. Can you use monies, for example, travel allowances from the Office of the President for COVID-19 fight, giving this constitutional provision, regardless of what the Finance Act says, because this provision takes precedence. So I would really like an explanation of that, because I don't want us to do the right thing the wrong way, because I understand this is important and we need the funds, but if we really require an appropriation bill, I think that needs to come, and it is necessary for it to come. Now, the second legislation the United Government passed was the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. This was to provide for food security, support for the unemployed people. Now, this brings me to my next point, which is very important and which the executive failed to take into consideration. If you look at the Emergency Act, it is saying when an emergency proclamation is enforced, the President may, subject to the Constitution, make such regulations to appear to him or her necessary, and also maintaining supplies and services essential to the life of the community. With these regulations, I know these are necessary, but they should have been, this regulation should have gone further. This government needs to tell us what regulations are they putting in place to guarantee that there will be enough food supplies, food security during this period. This is very important, and this is what we do not see. That's why we have a problem to give you the entire 90 days. And I think the government needs to come up with a strategic plan addressing all these issues. The second thing the Act says is under Section 3(2)(f). They should provide for payment of compensation and remuneration to persons affected by the regulations. So this means these regulations must have been accompanied with a plan on how to compensate those affected. That is, it's straightforward. It must have been accompanied with a plan on how you are going to compensate those affected. And also a health plan. The reason why I asked yesterday whether the Minister of Justice in coming up with these regulations has liaised with finance is that there must be economic regulations as well. The Ministry of Finance must have come, they have to come together. There must have been economic regulations on what we are going to do during this period, what the budget can offer, what the donor partners can offer, and this had to be budgeted for. We know line by line, this 500 million, where is this going? Where is that going? For example, I would suggest that 200 million out of this 500 million to be put aside right now from this moment for social protection, for packages for vulnerable families. And this is what I expected from this government to do. I don't know why they were not thinking along these lines, because you had time. You had enough time from the first case, which was registered the 17th, if I'm correct, or the 18th of March to now, the 2nd of April. You had at least 15 days to have done the planning, the strategic planning. And this brings me to the Ministry of Health, this 500 million. And this 90 days you are asking us, what is your plan during these 90 days? You need to tell us how many isolation centers you are going to put up during these 90 days. And most importantly, how many tests you are going to conduct during these 90 days, because that is very important. It is commendable that the work you have done during this period, we appreciate it. And that we have only 4 cases. If that is the case, and we were certain of that these were the only 4 cases, we wouldn't have even need a state of emergency, because all these cases are important. But you and I know there is a danger that there are people walking around with this virus and they do not know. How many tests have we conducted? Did we follow the line of tracing to the end? So these are the reasons why we need this state of emergency. But you need to have a plan of what to do during this period. You need to know how many tests you will need to conduct, how many tests you would conduct. For example, you can say we will sample, and each of these constituencies will come to your constituency and test 300 people, 200 people. This is the only way we can be certain that we don't have many more cases. And this has to be done, and this should have been included in the plan that was coming with these regulations. There should be a strategic plan of how we are going to move forward during these 45 days. Another important thing is how many orders of the ventilators have you placed? How many are we buying from this 500 million? Because I've heard information that we have only 5 ventilators in this country. Mind you, if we have more than 5 people with this virus and they need these ventilators, people will die. So we need to know this money, how many have you placed orders for these ventilators, when are we expecting them? These are the informations you have to give us so we can make an informed decision whether we would give you 90 days or not. We need this information for us to make a decision. How many isolation centers are you going to set up? How many tests are you going to conduct in up-country? All these things we need to address this pandemic. Just a minute, Honorable Speaker. I just made notes somewhere that I want to. Sorry, I have my notes all over, so I just want to be careful that I don't forget something important I wanted to mention. Okay, go ahead. Thank you. Sorry.
I'm sure if you do, the chairperson can fill in the gap.
Okay. And this brings me also to the economic measures. The honorable member of Birkama just mentioned that the hotel industry is owing 350 million to tour agencies. Now, this is things that the Minister of Finance needed to think about throughout this period. What stimulate packages do you have? How do you guarantee that this economy we won't create the economy during this period? What guarantees that this economy will move from this? We need this plan. What plans do you have to make sure after COVID-19 our economy will not collapse? What are your plans? This is what we need to hear from you by now. You bring bills to make sure that we have these measures in bills to plan for after COVID-19. Because if the hotels will not get a stimulus packages to help them take care of their bills, what happens to those businesses? Committee, because I would take this opportunity to register my disappointment with what I've seen going on online about the COVID-19 committee trying to put assembly. If we're asking those in the markets to sacrifice opening their stores, then we should sacrifice something like an allowance. So I really would like to register my disappointment in that and want those civil servants to be named and shamed and, if possible, taken out of the committee, because we don't need that kind in this desperate moments.
Honorable.
Yes, I will just wind up. Now, I would just give another example of the emergency powers. We do understand that certain businesses are being prosecuted for failure to abide by the regulations. Now, this is why it is even more important, because you have the responsibility to prosecute, you have the responsibility to also compensate. If we want people to adhere to these regulations, these compensatory packages and the plan and the strategy we must have. It must come to the Parliament for us to approve. And for that reason, I would say again, we give 45 days on the condition that in 2 weeks, they are going to come up with a strategic plan on how to address all the issues we have raised here. And if we are satisfied with the plan, we extend to 90 days. If not, we revoke the state of emergency. I beg to take my seat.
Thank you. Thank you very much. At this point, I would like to invite the Vice Chairperson to reply to the issues that have been raised by honorable members on the report.